I'd like to welcome you all to Sunday service. For those who don't know us, my name is Anandi. This is my husband, Bharat. And we especially like to welcome our guests at the Expanding Light and those who've come from far away. Glad to have you here. So I'll begin this morning by reading from Rays of the One Light. These are parallel passages from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Kriyananda. And this week's reading is called Deeds versus Intentions. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ emphasized repeatedly the spirit, not the letter of the law. In chapter 5 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, he speaks of the sin of killing and of the legal punishment attendant on that sin, but says that more important than the act is the desire to kill or to do harm. He shows that the sin of harmful desire goes beyond merely wanting to kill. My message to you, he said, is this. Whoever is angry with his brother without cause already stands condemned. Whoever contemptuously calls his brother a fool shall answer for it to the Supreme Council. And whoever calls his brother an outcast of God shall be in danger of hellfire. Brother here means any other human being. For all of us in the highest sense are brothers and sisters, children of our one Father, Mother, God. The true self of one is the self of all. To hurt another is, even if one doesn't realize it, to hurt oneself. Swami Kriyananda in The Path recalls an episode in which the master, Paramahansa Yogananda, revealed his sense of identity even with the plants. One day, Kriyananda wrote, we were moving a delicate but rather heavy tropical plant into position on the hillside. Our handling evidently was too rough, for Master cried out, "Be careful what you are doing! Can't you feel? It's alive!" To wish death to anyone, to wish even harm to another creature, is to deny in oneself the reality of that divine life of which all of us are manifestations. It is, in short, to deny the eternal truth proclaimed by the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter. This self is never born, nor does it perish. Once existing, it cannot ever cease to be. It is birthless, eternal, changeless, ever itself. It is not slain when the body is slain. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning. I'd like to read from Whispers from Eternity first. I pray to behold my love reflected in others. In the light of that greater love, may I behold thine unveiled face of perfect compassion. May I behold my true self in others, that I perceive thee ever enthroned in our united hearts. At the hearts of my whispered prayers I feel stirring thy silent whispers, In the light of my burning candle of devotion, I behold at last thy sacred blaze of perfect love. O Divine Mother, unite our hearts as one heart, so that on the sacred altar of united hearts, we may find thine omnipresence enthroned forever. J. Allen Boone, the author of Kinship with All Life, in another book of his, told an amazing story. He had heard out in the jungle that there was a place where the monkeys gathered. And so he got directions and he went out to this place, and it was a little clearing in the forest. And he sat down, and he was used to waiting and tuning in. And so he waited there quietly. Then after a while, a big monkey dropped down off the limb and onto the forest floor and sat there and looked at him, and then walked closer to him, and then sat a safe distance away and just stared at J. Allen Boone. And he looked back, and he sent thoughts of friendship and love back to the big monkey. Well, after a while, the monkey turned around like he was looking through the rest of the clearing. Then all of a sudden, the monkeys that were hidden back in the forest came to the edge of the clearing, and they started dropping down. It was almost like falling rain, but it was falling monkeys. And little ones fell from the branches, and middle-sized ones, and mothers with their babies. And the whole clearing was filled with monkeys. And some were in groups chattering and chasing each other, and others were quiet and sitting by themselves. And he was just sitting there enjoying all the monkeys. And then after a while, he saw that all the monkeys turned and looked to the south. And then immediately they fled to the north. Well, he was curious on why did they do that and why did they leave? And he happened to check his watch at what time it was. And then he wanted to find out what disturbed the monkeys. And he waited, and after about 3 hours, he heard some voices approaching him. And as they came into the clearing, they had guns, and they were monkey hunters. And they asked, "Have you seen any monkeys?" And J. Allen Boone said, "No, I haven't seen any monkeys." There was a higher law here than lying. And then he was curious. He said, "What time did you decide to go hunting?" And they said it was 3 hours ago, as when they left the house with the intent to go hunting. Well, it was very interesting because that was exactly the time the monkeys turned south and then fled north. And the Buddha said that thoughts are real things, and that thoughts, we know, have consequences. It's like throwing a stone in a pond, and then it ripples out from there. And the monkeys just, they, as far as they were away from those hunters, they sense the intent of those hunters, and that's when they fled. But Swami said a very interesting thing in the sort of parallel readings in his book, Promise of Immortality, where he talks about a flow of energy is always greatest at its source. And he talks about, the horror of someone killing somebody. But he said, the greatest sin is committing suicide because you're denying life in yourself. And then he goes on and talks about if you judge others, of course that's wrong. But judging oneself is even a greater error. And actually, it's because we judge ourselves that we try to take the heat off ourselves and judge other people. And so, when we get discouraged, we get down on ourselves, we're really denying the life and that we're the child of God in ourselves. And I've come to realize that a sin is just simply a lost opportunity to feel God's joy. And as we know, Paramahansa Yogananda said that we should never call ourselves a sinner. I love the image when he was at a revival, and the woman minister there said, "You're all sinners, get down on your knees." And Master said, "Never," as I said, call yourself a sinner. And he looked around and he was the only one standing. And we should, as we go through life, we should be the only one standing in the same. Hopefully there'll be others standing with us. But, never buy into that, because we're denying that gift which has been given in each of us. There's a beautiful story of Father Kolbe, and he was a prisoner in Auschwitz. And in his cell block, a prisoner had escaped. And so the penalty is that the Germans gave to the prisoners is that they would starve slowly 10 to 20 prisoners from each cell block if one ever escaped. And so they lined up all the prisoners, and there was 10 rows of 60 prisoners in a row, and they were just choosing the different prisoners. And they chose... it was maybe 15. It was somewhere between 10 and 20. And the relief in every prisoner that wasn't chosen was, oh my gosh, they didn't choose me. Well, there was one man that was sobbing that was chosen. And he said, oh, my wife and children. And this is when Father Kolbe said, I would like to make a request, sir, to the SS officer. And the SS officer said, well, what do you want? And he said, I have no wife and children, and I would like to take his place. Can I? And so they allowed him to take the place of the prisoner. And he went into the cell block, and they were slowly starving the prisoners. But Father Kolbe led all the other prisoners in deep prayer, so deep that when the guards opened the door and tried to talk to the prisoners, they would say something, and the prisoners couldn't even hear the guards, and the guards had to shout and to get their attention. And then, just several days passed, and usually the prisoners, after a few days, they were so agitated about what was happening to them and their fate that they really went downhill very fast. But none of these prisoners did, because they were held up in the beautiful prayer energy and the attunement that Father Kolbe had with Spirit. And then after some days, most of the other prisoners were very weak and lying on the cement floor. But Father Kolbe, when the guards came, they saw that he was standing or maybe kneeling, and he was bright and attentive. And he would, when the guards would come in, he would just look at them. And they were so intimidated by his look. It wasn't a mean look, but it was a look kind of like, we're all children of God. I'm sure that was in the look. And the SS guards said, don't look at us, look down on the ground when we come here, because they couldn't bear that look of his. And then finally, it was taking too long for Father Kolbe to die. And so they came in and they injected him. And it's a very interesting story, a very moving story. But to just think about what Swami said, is that a flow of energy is always strongest at its source. I'm sure the prisoner, he was able, maybe, if he was fortunate, to have seen his children and his wife again. And he felt really great relief, but I'm sure he felt a growing respect for the sacrifice of Father Kolbe. But you look at what has happened in the life of Father Kolbe. He was able to stay in the Spirit and share the Spirit with all those other prisoners. And, whenever, that energy that we express in life is most felt in ourselves, isn't it? And Swami said that when we give love to others, we discover in ourselves love. And when we serve others, we feel expanded sense of joy. And that's the real reason for doing anything, is because we identify more and more with that joy, and we're able to share that joy with other people. There's a book that a man wrote, and it's become very popular, and many of us know about this book, but I'd just like to mention this book again. It's Messages from Water, and this Japanese scientist took pictures of the water crystals, and he would play music and different kinds of music, classical music or heavy metal music, or he had just put words in the sample. And he said that the crystals just reflected the kind of energy that was around it, or the intent of the words. And even the simple intent of two different expressions, do it and let's do it, was vastly different in terms of how those crystals turned out. Because when it was do it, spoken more as a command, it was very murky and unformed, those crystals. But when it was let's do it, more of an encouraging sense of unity, they were just perfectly clear and formed, the crystals. And again, when somebody's mad, it reflects in us, and we get mad. We see the carryover, don't we? It sort of shatters our consciousness and stays with us. Swami, is just over and over again, it's just been such an incredible blessing for us to live with somebody like Swami, because he really sees everyone as a child of God. And it's just, in every moment of his life, he's relating to the highest in each of us and trying to draw out the divinity in each one of us. There's a story that, it's a very moving story I'd like to share, but what's really moving about it is that this is just one of a story that would probably happen every hour and every 5 minutes of his life. But he was at a doctor's waiting room in the hospital and just waiting, and there was an elderly man there slumped over and just very lethargic. And Swami looked at the man and he said, "Good morning," and just beamed such love at him that the man sort of woke up and he felt more alert and more alive. Well, it's that quality of just, but the only way to really get that quality is through meditation. Master was, Paramahansa Yogananda was talking, writing a letter to Rajarsi Janakananda, his most advanced disciple, and when Yogananda was in India, and he said that the way to really awaken that sense of divinity, to really share with the people, is to go deep in meditation yourself and to really experience that unity of consciousness in your own self. And it will speak so loudly through you that it will awaken it in other people. God has given us, has put us all together. He could have just put us by ourselves and we could just slowly evolve and come back to spirit. But he's given us advantage of putting us all together so that we can really learn to expand our sense of identity and have a greater sense of who we are. There was a student at the Ananda Meditation Teachers course last week, and Greg told me that one of that student worked in a prison, and he said that a cat wandered into the prison yard, and the prisoners just love animals, and 100 prisoners just gathered around the cat, just looking at that cat, and it just sort of pulled them out of themselves into something else. And I just love, John Muir, more place names are named after him than any other person in California. And he's really appreciated for his consciousness. And I'd like to read just a little something about how nature helped to expand his consciousness. And he was talking about a dog. They went on an exciting adventure across the glacier, and they almost died crossing the crevasses. And they were able to just make it, and the dog's name was Stakeen, and this is what Muir had to say. "Stakeen enlarged my life and extended its boundaries. This child dog of the wilderness taught me much. I learned that both in humans and animals, love, hope, and fear are essentially the same, derive from the same source, and fall on all alike like sunshine. Through Stakeen as through a window, I've been able to look into the heart of all my brothers of the horizontal world and ever since I've felt a deeper sympathy for all my fellow mortals. My days in the wilderness will live with me always. Everything there was so alive and familiar. It's wonderful how nature is a part of us. The sun shines not in us, but on us. Or the sun shines not on us, but in us. The river flows not past, but through us. It's wonderful how everything is our kin. One fancies that a heart like our own must be beating in every crystal and cell. No wonder when we consider that we have the same father and mother. And it's just that expanded sense of who we are and living in that and to really see that in each other. But it only really comes through really deeply experiencing it in ourselves. Master said, Paramahansa Yogananda said that all good things come from stillness. And it comes from stopping our own momentum, and the ego always refers everything back to itself and its own point of reference. One of the sons of Teddy Roosevelt amusingly told about his father. His father was a very great man, Teddy Roosevelt, but he said, my father liked to be the center of attention. In fact, he liked to be the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral. And, not everybody could be the bride at every wedding. And when people are sort of vying for that, you can see where we get the hearty give and take and the clash of society. Not a few weeks ago, in the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle, a story was told about John Robbins. He's a man who has written many books, Diet for America, and he's written about sustainability. But John Robbins, he grew up as a Robbins in the Baskin. He was an heir to the Baskin-Robbins fortune, and in his backyard was a swimming pool shaped like an ice cream cone, but he just felt that was all shallow, and it didn't really mean anything to him, and so he rejected all that, and he wanted to do something that he felt was more meaningful in his life. Well, he recently, he and his wife, they lost 98% of their net worth because of an unscrupulous financier, and actually the same one that a lot of charities had their money with. And he wasn't invested directly with this man, but he lost everything. And he and his wife were just shattered. They just from one night to the next morning, everything was gone basically. And he had many responsibilities and taking care of grandchildren with special needs. And but he didn't have time to commiserate with himself. He had to do something if he was going to save his home. And his wife said something to him that was very poignant. She said to John, if you had sold your soul by taking the Baskin-Robbins path, made a lot of money, and then lost it, what would you have? You would have nothing. This loss doesn't tarnish your work one bit, and it doesn't tarnish the person you've become. And John said, yes, that's right, I still have my integrity. And that reminds me of a fun story. There was a man, elderly man, who was dying, and he told his long-suffering wife to bury me with all my money. And the wife, being very dutiful all these many years, said, okay, I will. And then it came time for the funeral, and as the undertaker was getting ready to close the casket, the wife came up and put a metal box in the casket. And her friend said, you didn't put the money in there, did you? And the wife said, the widow said, well, I told my husband I would. So I took all his money and I put it in my bank account, and then I wrote him a check. And if he can cash it, he's welcome to it. Well, John Robbins had something happen to him that, was very traumatic. But, there's something that's going to happen to each of us in, I don't know, hopefully maybe 50 decades, or some maybe a little bit closer than that, or maybe some longer. But all of us are going to have to leave behind everything that we've accomplished and gathered to ourselves in this world. And what's going to remain? The only thing that's going to remain is the quality of our energy, and that's it. And so the intent behind everything we do is so important. And again, as Swami said, a flow of energy always has this greatest impact very close to it. And so to as we go through life, realize that that's the only thing that's needed. We can, where do we get out of sort of tune or disharmonious with other things? It's because we're worried about sort of what we can pull, what we can gather to ourselves, and or to pump up our self, our ego. But if we don't have that, then we don't get out of kilter so much. And so to just realize that in a few years, I'm going to have nothing. All I'm going to have is the quality of my response as I go through life, the quality of my energy towards other people. There's a beautiful story of Kunti, and her 3 of her sons were banished into the forest. And she felt very sad and despondent. And she was a great devotee of Krishna. And she, during this time, the only ways that she could overcome her pain of separation from her sons was to think of Lord Krishna. And she just thought of Lord Krishna all day long. Then after a while, she found that she was just living in the thought of Lord Krishna, and life became very joyful. She missed her sons, but just feeling the presence of God was what was most important and filled her. And Krishna, seeing what Kunti had, where her consciousness was, came to her and said, "I'm very pleased with your devotion, and I would like to give you a boon. And what would you like? What can I give you?" And Kunti said, "Oh Lord, it was with my sons being banished to the forest that made me think of you. Lord Krishna, if it pleases you, give me more suffering so that I can think of you." And we grow through suffering, and we really reach for beyond the experience of life, beyond where we're at in the moment. And I'd like us to do this visualization. We've been using this in Swami's Material Success course. We've been studying at Ananda Village. And a lot of people have had very moving experiences with this, but it's a way to deeply accept what God has given to us. If we reject what God is giving us, how can we expect to receive His grace and blessings? And everything that comes to us is karma, and it's perfectly made for us to grow and to free ourselves. Not too long ago, I fell off a ladder, and I was lying there and just sort of stunned. And it was an 8-foot fall, and I didn't know if I could move my body or not, if something was injured, and I had to go to Europe in 3 days to lecture. And but I had the grace to remember what Swami has frequently told us. And he said that karma is an expression of divine love. And in that thought, I knew that everything would be okay, no matter what happened. I had help from friends. There's one in the audience, David Kessler, who is an osteopath, but I was able to go to Europe. But more importantly, I was able to stay in the sense of that God is really behind every experience that comes to me in life, and not become fearful. Well, I'd like you to close your eyes, and let's do this visualization together. I'll read, and you try to go into the heart of it. Karma is an expression of divine love. Everything that comes to us is made especially for us by God to free us from all limitation. Visualize God as the Divine Mother standing before you. See her eyes gazing deeply into your own and filling you with her love. Know that she is with you always. Think now of a karma that is especially challenging for you. See Divine Mother holding before you this karmic test. See her smile at you. Then reach out and offer this test to you with loving kindness. Reach out your arms and take a hold of this karma. Bring this karmic challenge into your heart. Accept this precious gift sent from the wisdom of the universe. Know that it is a perfect gift sent by Divine Mother to help your soul become free. In your heart, embrace this karmic test fully with gratitude and trust. This karma will help you raise your energy level and consciousness to where your godly nature resides. Focus now at the point between the eyebrows. See yourself rising to meet this karmic test and transcending its limitations. Feel yourself becoming free in God. Feel the bliss of being united with Spirit. Before every meditation, or when anything comes into your life that's intense, if you wish, you can practice this visualization to help you to have a greater sense that God is with you, that everything that comes to you is being guided by God. And the more that we can embrace the gifts that we are given, the more that we'll be able to move through our karma and to be free of all limitation and shine with the light of God and to share that light with others. Om, peace. Amen.